who have straight up rage quit a job. What was the final straw? Story 1. Many years ago, while working in a manufacturing facility, my boss came into work already pissed off because his wife served him divorce papers. Saying good morning was apparently enough to set him off, and he picked up a wrench from the table and threw it at my head. I ducked it, missed, then I just closed my toolbox and wheeled it to the truck, lol. Story 2. Not me, but a colleague once wrote a long stinker of an email, hit send at 10:30 a.m., and exited the building immediately. He blind copied all receivers, but sent it to multiple departments of a large multinational I was working at. No one knew who didn't get the email, except for the gasps and OMGs around the office. He was completely disgruntled and went in on multiple managers, supervisors, and various colleagues with absolute venom. It was amazing, still the best work email I've ever received, and some he called out actually had to be addressed by management. It brought about a lot of positive change. If you're out there, Khalil, that was awesome. Story 3. This was 20 years ago. My fiancée had been hospitalized for 16 months after a car accident. When she passed away, my boss would not let me have time off for bereavement because we were not legally married. Story 4. I never have, but my favorite example was when a coworker in student transportation, who had finally gotten a position she wanted after years of suffering through stress and another, was called by management over the summer and told she was being reassigned to the stressful position because no one else wanted to do it. She had fought too long and hard to get what she wanted, and her immediate response was, "Then tell me what I need to do to resign." She did, and she's been at peace with her decision ever since. Story 5. I was waiting tables while I was in grad school. I had requested a weekend off far in advance right after I got my syllabus because there was a seminar pertinent to a class. Our professor expected us to go and write a paper. It was a decent chunk of our grade. The weekend comes up, and lo and behold, I'm scheduled doubles Friday through Sunday. I hunt down the manger and say I can't do that, and I've given months' notice. She pulls the requests, or just requests, not guarantees, and I tell her point blank I will fail this class if I don't go. She shrugged. She said, "That isn't my problem." I told her is now and left. Like I was going to fail a class for my master's degree waiting tables at a rainforest cafe. Story 6. At one office job, I quit after the first day because the lady training me would ignore me when our manager wasn't around, and I caught her snooping through my purse when I went to the bathroom. At another job at a clinic, I quit after a month because they made me do a solo receptionist shift without training me on what I needed to do to open the clinic, and then I got yelled at for not knowing what to do. In front of patients, it was so bad. Some of the patients came up to me after and asked if I was okay. Story 7. I was flat out lied to about the position. It was a management position at a residential mental health facility, and I had taken it, leaving a great paying but stressful position because it wouldn't require travel and was supposed to be much more laid back. On top of many other issues, I ended up having to work 8 weeks straight, without a single day off, even weekends and one holiday. So after a very heated meeting with upper management where one person was flat out lying to cover their own, but I sent a resignation email from the parking lot. Story 8. When I was driving home and my blood pressure shot through the roof, cause somebody was driving the same make, model, and color car as the boss. Obviously that wasn't the straw, just the recognition that there was to be no more straws. Story 9. One very busy night, while waitressing, I was standing at a table of 12 in the middle of taking their order when another waitress came up to me and said our boss wanted us in their office that instant. So I leave my full section in the middle of chaos to go see what the problem is. My boss began to chew us both out because the other girl asked if I would switch shifts with her, and I had agreed. I didn't say anything, but was obviously annoyed because I had just left all my tables thinking there was some sort of emergency. My boss looked at me and asked why I looked mad, and I told him I feel like this could have been sorted out without me. If you didn't want her to leave early, you could have just told her no instead of pulling me away from our customers. They said if you're going to have an attitude, get your and leave. I said okay, and went to transfer my tables. I was over it. I had worked there 3 years, and the owners were alcoholics that treated us like garbage and spent all the company on themselves instead of getting ingredients to make food or paying their employees. The other waitress came back out and said our boss wanted me back in the office. I went in and they said, "Put your apron back on. You're not fired." I said, "You're both crazy if you think you can treat people the way you do and expect them to want to work for you." And I walked out. As I was leaving, they came out behind me saying I would regret it and was never allowed back if I left. I threw my middle fingers and kept walking. Funny part is I let my boyfriend take my car to work that night, so I had to walk a mile home and break into my house. Story 10. I was working when I got the call that my partner of 7 years had been in a terrible car accident while visiting family in Florida. He was in the hospital, and his mother called me to tell me he wasn't awake yet. I was obviously devastated and scared out of my mind. told my coworkers and boss because it was obvious I was panicking, and they told me to take the rest of the weekend off so I could deal with things and prepare and clean his apartment for when if he got back. Specifically, they said to come back Monday, and it was a Friday. Next day, I was cleaning up his apartment when I got the call from my boss screaming about why I hadn't come into work that day. I told him that I recalled him telling me to take the weekend off and come back Monday. He said to come to work immediately because they needed me. Against my better judgment and my emotional state, I showed up and clocked in. Boss came up to me, threw the stack of checks down on the counter that had just come in, and told me, if you do that again, you're fired. This was someone who had never yelled at me before or even dared speak to me in any stern way. Prior to my arrival, their store was an absolute mess, and I spent all of my free time, what little there was, reorganizing and cleaning and setting up new systems. For some reason, the fact he chose to start speaking to me this way and demanding my attention now, at that time, it just made me snap. A chord was struck and it resonated strong. I got the message clearly. He was one of those bosses who became controlling of anyone who became of value to him and his business. The moment you aren't available when they need or even wanted you to be, they were going to make you feel bad about it. So you were afraid to ask for more personal time or any other leniencies that took you away from work. I was literally reeling, saw red. The moment he turned his back, I snatched my check, walked out with a full line of customers at the counter and the phone going off with incoming orders, and drove off. He blew up my phone all day, never came back or called back. Fortunately, he made it home safe and healed up fine. Unfortunately, he passed away on our anniversary a few years later. I regret every moment I passed up to spend time with him over that job, or any job for that matter. I know barely anyone is going to read this now that it's buried under a pile of other comments, but it still felt nice to type it out. Edit, I probably said kind words over a dozen times, but I really do mean it. Reddit can be just as comforting as it can be cruel. So it means a lot that you've all carved out a few seconds from your day to recognize me and my story and say some things. His name was Anthony, and I want everyone to know what an amazing, brilliant, kind gentleman. He was strong, dark, and stern, yet he was the light of my life. Please, please, please take the extra moment to ask your loved ones if they're okay. Story 11. I worked for a call center for ATT. I refused to try and sell a DirecTV package to a woman who was literally bawling her eyes out on the phone because she was having to switch her phone plan to her name instead of her husband's name because he had just died. Story 12. Godfather's Pizza. The manager wouldn't give me my paycheck at 8 p.m. on Sunday because the money might not be in the account yet, but I could pick it up at 9 a.m. Monday. This was decades ago, before direct and mobile deposits. The bank wouldn't be open until the next day anyway. All of the paychecks were literally in his hand at that moment. There were lots of issues before that, but that was the final sign that the manager was completely uninterested in reason. In the next few weeks, nearly everyone else quit. Then the manager was finally fired. Story 13. Was having a meeting with the boss, who was a difficult guy to work with, and he stood up and punched the wall. He wasn't doing it jokingly. He bare-knuckled went at the wall of his own office like he was in the gym hitting a punching bag. I sat there in astonishment for about 2 seconds, then stood up and left. Cleared out my desk, exited through the back door without a word to anyone. There's no place for that conduct in the professional world, even if the guy does own the company. Story 14. My boss cursed me because I took a phone message for him because he was already on a call. Apparently, he was eagerly awaiting the call I answered and would have preferred I interrupted him. I threw a pencil at the wall, said, "Do I look like a mind reader? Cut me my check, I quit." He tried hard to backpedal, but there had been many, many previous straws. Story 15. I was vomiting in the parking lot every day before walking into my job from stress. Then one day, I was kicked in the teeth literally by one of the clients, and my boss would not let me leave to go to the dentist. I went anyway, was docked pay for my time at the emergency appointment, and then they begged me not to sue. I quit. Story 16. Was promised that if I got my accounting degree, they would move me to IA so I could get hours toward my CPA, work my off, graduated, and the boss said, "Yeah, we're going to move you to customer service. Sound good?" Stayed late that night drafting a company-wide fuck you email. Probably shouldn't have done that in hindsight, but some bridges just begged to be burned. Story 17. Had a sweet schedule working security in a Class A office building. 3 swings 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. and 2 graves 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. per week. My weekend was Friday and Saturday. The graves were actually really chill, easy to deal with. I liked them, but only 2 of them. Then we get a new security company. All the supervisors are fired and new ones from the new company are brought in. Suddenly I'm working 5 graves. I asked for a change to swing. No dice. They offer to move me to a different site. It's 5 graves again. I find out my old supervisor is now working as security manager at a local mall. I give him a call, and he offers me a job. I took it, grabbed my uniform from the old company, drove to the office, walked it, dropped my uniform on the director's desk, turned and walked out. went down to the mall, and picked up my new uniform. Story 18. I was a supervisor of housekeeping at a hotel. Every holiday, all of management would take off, leaving me the highest in charge. I asked for a raise after working a full year of holidays as the only management and was denied the next year on the biggest party day in the city. I set all my employees up with their work and texted the managers a picture of me at the bar partying, telling them the hotel might be on fire. I don't know, I quit. Story 19. Mine. I was tired of doing a 3-person job, my boss following me around, calling me at home during meetings when I was sick, talking to me outside the bathroom door was making me crazy. I came back from vacation one day to find piles of work that other people could have done. I quit, packed my left. Story 20. My manager's boss did a surprise inspection, and my boss wrote me up for doing my job the exact way he trained me. Apparently, when he trained me, he was cutting corners. Story 21. He wouldn't train me properly, then come yell at me in front of the office. He would always threaten my job or like hiring someone else. And I finally said, good, I hope you find someone better, because I quit and will be leaving once other lady comes back from lunch. He tried to backpedal and ask if I was serious. I never looked back. ETA, he hired me without any experience because he knew he could lowball me. I got paid pennies for what someone with experience would get paid. Story 22. I was working as the kitchen at a 24-hour Greek restaurant, hired as dishwasher. Also doing coal prep and maintenance. I was the guy peeling 50-pound bags of onions grass potatoes, as well as making dry ribs, pizza, salad. I had booked off 3 days over a weekend. Got called on day 2 at 7 a.m. telling me I was late. Got there and was told I was on the 11 a.m. start. Then it got changed to 4 p.m. when I went in again. Then got changed to 11 p.m. when I went in for 4 p.m. And when I went in for 11 p.m., it was changed again to actually have me off for the 3 days for schedule changes in 24 hours. Laws here say 1 week minimum notice. That owner would change the schedule after you clocked out to say you work shorter hours on a regular basis, and you pretty much had to check at 7 a.m. to see if you were on for the day. I had my choice words. Told him I'd be back in 2 weeks for my paycheck. Story 23. The owner of the company told me to fire a woman for arriving to work right on time. It was always something different with him, some ridiculous new rule that he applied retroactively to suit whatever mood he was in on any given day. And that particular morning, he took it as a personal insult and a show of blatant disrespect that his employees didn't arrive early. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't fire this woman, who I didn't even particularly like, to satisfy this new whim of his. So, instead of firing her, I marched into his office and quit myself. Funnily enough, the woman I wouldn't fire continued working for him for years. She might even still be there now, 20-some years later. Story 24. Worked an upscale busy bar a couple years back right after COVID. We were constantly understaffed, overworked, and treated like from management and customers. One Friday night, my manager let the other bartender go early because he had a crush on her and wanted in her pants. I got overwhelmed by a rush, and he started bitching at me about not being able to handle the bar. I looked at him in the eye, about to really rage, and without a word walked to the back into the liquor room, grabbed 2 bottles of Jameson, put them in my backpack, and walked out the front door. My manager's fearful, confused face while asking, where are you going? What are you doing? Was absolutely priceless. Best decision I made, and I'm not joking, LMAO. Story 25. I was a receptionist for a medical software company. Boss refused my request for a single day off to take my teen daughter to get eye surgery. I waited until the first day of her 2-week vacation and put in my notice. Ruined her holiday. Story 26. Working as a mortuary transporter, the dude who picks up corpses and brings them back to be cremated for a family-owned crematory. Boss was kind of and her husband was an idiot. Constant on-call overnight shifts and 0 PTO days. But honestly, I really enjoyed the work, so I put up with it. The problem was that my boss refused to do direct deposit. This was 2 years ago, so it's not like DD was unheard of, and she'd hand us out checks on Monday. I'd been on call the weekend prior to payday, and it was really busy, particularly Sunday night. I was out from like 8 p.m. until 6 a.m. picking up corpses, so on Monday, I called out because I didn't want to drive a full shift on 0 hours of sleep. Well, in my constant sleep deprivation, I'd forgotten I was supposed to get paid. That Friday, I was talking to a coworker on our way to a pickup and mentioned how I couldn't wait to get paid next week. And he gave me this look and told me we got paid on Monday and asked if I'd never got my check. So at the end of the day, I went to my boss and asked, and she just laughed and joked that she'd wondered when I would ask for it and had hoped I'd just forgotten. So her playing cute with my checks was the beginning of the end. Then next payday, she sat us all down and explained that from here on out, drivers were not allowed to call out simply because they'd worked all night before. By this point, she had driven off all the other transporters and was down to me and one other dude full-time, with another transporter coming in 2 days a week, and her business couldn't function if either of us called out. So I got my check from her, And then at the end of the day, I ended up working till 10 p.m. that night. I left her a note saying I quit effective immediately and to mail me my last check. A few months later, the other driver texted me and told me that she had never replaced me, and that Head quit and got hired at another funeral home and convinced a part-time driver to go with him. I just checked the website and apparently they're still open. Ick how they managed with nobody to get the corpses. Story 27. Well, I'm genuinely about to right now after my manager told me our dishwasher is broken and won't get fixed until at least Thursday, and I have to pull solo shifts next week because we're seriously understaffed after 2 people were let go in January. Despite me telling management repeatedly that we actually need more people to account for all the vacation days and sick leaves happening right now, update, apparently restarting fix the broken dishwasher. So that's at least one problem off my back. Story 28. Worked in retail. Sprained my ankle really bad while ice skating. Couldn't so much as get out of bed. Had to call in and take 2 days off before I was even able to limp to work. Soon as I got back in, manager pulled me into his office to scream at me for taking 2 days off for a physical injury that physically made it. So I could not do my job, threw a cold cup of coffee on him, and walked out. My only regret is that the coffee was cold. Story 29. My manager started snapping her fingers in my face, 3 inches away from my eyes, saying in a slow drawl, "You're doing it wrong. Hello, that's not how I told you to do it," when I was folding the shirts somewhat slower and less optimally than I was shown, though achieving the same fold. Also, it was my 3rd week and one of 20 folds I had to learn on that job. I walked right then and there. Story 30. Had to drive to a site. Directions were wrong. Ended up having to walk a mile in North Texas in July with 35 pounds of materials. ETA, this is pre-cell phone. Story 31. I had a boss at a dog daycare who was a pure sociopath. She deliberately tried to set her employees against each other with gossip and listen to our conversations on the remote cameras and use what we said against each other. It gets worse, but she heard me talking to another employee about finding another job, then confronted me and told me she would just take all my hours away if I was going to quit. Then she heard me tell another employee I contacted the Department of Labor to find out if that was legal. It is, and ambushed me after lunch to fire me in front of other employees. So, I heard you called the Labor Department about your hours. That won't be necess. And at this point, I realize this is the only chance I'm going to get to just unload on this, and I'm taking it. I went OFF. Okay, first of all, you insane Brazilian, who the DO you think you are, I unleashed the beast for 10 straight minutes right at her face. I told her about when we lied to her face about throwing away shock collars she used on the customers' dogs without their knowledge or consent, how she's a miserable and ugly human being. The employees hate her. We all dread her coming in because she everything up, how she was stupid. Her husband is a pedophile and probably a rapist. Raked her over the coals about the time she forgot a customer's dog in the car for 3 hours in May and then lied to the customer about it. I remember one point I yelled, "Didn't you ever wonder why everyone who quits this has nothing good to say about working here? ITSU. You're a miserable." And eventually I gave her the finger, said, "Fuck this and you. I'm out." I talked to one of the employees who witnessed the entire thing later, and he said, "Well, you made a lot of good points." Worked at a Korean barbecue restaurant. They said since I was unexperienced, they will cut my wages, hired me as a server, and made me clean toilets and grills all day, 12-hour shift, gave me $9.45 in cash, quit on the spot. Story 32. Want to take long service leave holidays, but got denied because we're too busy right now. A few months later, wanted to take long service leave holidays, but got denied because we're too busy right now. A few months later, want to take long service leave holidays, but got denied because we're too busy right now. I replied to that email with my resignation, handed him my pass to security, and walked out the door. Story 33. He gave me literally 72 hours worth of work and insisted it be completed in 36 hours. When I pointed the inconsistency out, he said, "Do what you can." And when I submitted it, he called me from vacation to scream at me about mistakes. I deleted everything, walked away, blocked him on everything. ETA, 72 business hours and 36 calendar hours. Story 34. The company told me I was to enforce 2 new policies. 1. All employees must report to work 15 minutes early for their shift. However, they would not be paid for that time. 2. All employees must take their unpaid lunch break in specific areas, under very specific circumstances. I told them we needed to have a meeting to discuss the legality of their new policies before I could enforce them on my team. They replied, "Either you enforce the policies or you resign your position." I said, "See ya." They begged me to reconsider and to not make a bad decision just because I was upset. Unfortunately, I was already out the door. Story 35. I was exhausted, had been working 50-hour weeks and couldn't wait until Christmas break. I was the only person out of 25 required to work Saturday mornings on a 6-week fundraiser in addition to my regular hours. Others were only scheduled once. I was scheduled all 6 Saturdays. Finally, a foreign colleague wanted to work Christmas, so she could go to her home country early in the next year. The entire office was supposed to be closed for those 2 weeks. The boss picked me to be with her and refused to let me say no. I didn't want to take a break later when the rest of my family would have been off over Christmas. And I couldn't bear to have waited another 2 weeks, as I was barely hanging on right then. She wouldn't let it go, so I quit. The boss decided to work with her herself. That was fine with me. The mystery is why it had to be me or her out of 25 coworkers. Well, not my problem. Story 36, I was told I wasn't working hard enough after months of 70-hour weeks, being salaried, doing multiple people's jobs. I had asked multiple times to hire someone else. I knew we had the budget on the job. I agreed to work harder and called mom to vent because I was so angry. During the call, she texted my then boyfriend, now husband, to go to me because she genuinely thought I was going to kill myself. I'll admit I was hysterical, so I get why she was worried. When he told me that I called my boss back and quit with no notice. What was even more up is a few days later, I was asked to call my former boss to calm her down and say it wasn't her fault. I didn't, but I did calmly explain how she burned me out and multiple people needed to be hired to cover the workload I was doing, otherwise the same thing would happen again. Story 37, I was sweating my off at a convenience store, in the back room washing dishes or something, and this bitch a lady I worked with came in, saw me sweating to death, and then went back out and told people I was washing my hair in the sink with the dishes. I said, this place sucks, and I just never went back. I went back to work at McDonald's after that. Story 38, when I was 20, I worked a commission-based sales job. The manager hated me for some reason. I genuinely to this day have no idea why. I tried really hard, had a good attitude, and followed all the rules. My sales weren't extraordinary, but I always met my numbers. My grandmother died about 6 months into the job. I texted my manager to tell him I'd be taking my 3 days of bereavement, as allowed by the union. I even apologized for the inconvenience, as though I could control my grandmother's death. He called me the day after she died, accusing me of lying, saying I was lazy and just wanted the time off. Keep in mind ID never called out before or even been more than 5 minutes late to a shift. I sent him medical documentation proving Shed had a stroke during the night and passed away. He called me back and said fine, I could have that day off, but he better see me the next day, my 3rd day of union-protected bereavement, or I'd be fired. Stricken with grief, but terrified of losing my job, I drove the 2 hours back to my apartment from the grandmother's house that night. The next morning, I went into work tired and melancholy. He bitched at me to smile, because no one wants to buy cell phones from a sad girl. I plastered on a smile and hit the sales floor. At lunchtime, I cried my eyes out of my car, reapplied my makeup, went back to work with my fake smile. I was in the middle of helping a customer when he comes bouldering up to the table and starts asking the customer all the same questions I had to see what products they'd be eligible for. The customer was baffled and told him ID already covered everything and that no further help was necessary. He went on a rant about what a terrible, useless employee I was. I looked at the customer and deadpan said, I'm so sorry to leave you with him, but as of this moment, I quit. The manager followed me to the break room, shouting and raving while I gathered my purse, turned in my equipment, and clocked out. He followed me to my car, still berating me. Finally, that same customer I walked away from came out and physically stood between me and the manager, so I could get in my car and drive away. The manager proceeded to call me every day for a week and leave abusive voicemails about me missing shifts because he didn't accept my resignation. He even called me the day of my grandmother's funeral and said now that she had been cremated, I had no excuse not to come back to work, ATT, and that Jeremy. I hope he eventually got a taste of his own medicine when I realized I was running the boss's business and he balked on my timesheet. Story 39, this just happened last week. I was driving a shuttle bus for a retirement community, and the maintenance department manager accused me of drinking on the job. It was an absolutely out-of-pocket accusation without a shred of proof other than his claim of smelling it on me. There are hand sanitizer stations next to every time clock, and I use them. I said, we'll take a breathalyzer test right now. Let's go. And he balked. Pretended like he didn't just accuse me of putting the residents' lives at risk, and then expected me to finish my shift. I noped the out of there and went straight to calling out sick for the next week until they fired me for no call, no showing for an entire week. Check your voicemails. That place with a soiled catheter. I was a community engagement officer, which basically means I took a disabled adult out in the community to achieve certain goals, i.e., grocery shopping, some basic concept of money and rudimentary budgeting, EXE. He was fine. His mom was a pill. The sort of pill that has been abusing underpaid staff at underfunded social services for entire decades, to the point her grip on what the world owed her for free was heavily screwed. Also, all she ever did for herself was sit on her bum in front of Netflix all day. She would call, almost always after I had wrapped up for the day and was driving him home, to demand that I stop at a convenience store for cigarettes, booze, or a specific fast food joint on the other side of town, because I'm apparently a free personal courier. My favorite moment was when she actually had me pick up cigarettes and drop them off at her cousins, because why not get the whole family in on abusing impoverished public servants? I try to set simple boundaries with her. You can ask me when I'm leaving for X, Y, and X, and she would just show her so much, oh, I don't know when I'll be needing cigarettes. I just call when I do, oh, I can't afford Instacart or Uber, even though my kid and I easily eat $1,000 in fast food a month. My car is $500 a month, and we haven't even started talking about booze and cigs, no. Paying people for their labor is where I need to cut my corners. So I cut her off. She continues to pretend she doesn't understand that she is cut off like a 5-year-old. Anyway, she demands that I go to a convenience store and get her cigarettes. I say no, and then this sits on her fat, yards away from a $500-a-month car, and proceed to text her kid to harass me for what she thought she was owed. It occurred to me that no 10-hour gig was worth it, so I dropped him off at her place and told her I was glad she was going to be twitching and sweating all night and still owed money from that job that I will likely never see. Story 40, I'm a physician who does procedures. This business was composed of several outpatient offices. Specifically, we did a high volume of peripheral arterial interventions and dialysis access maintenance. We also performed vascular ultrasounds. In the first month, I watched my colleague sign off on numerous ultrasounds that he had not interpreted, only a preliminary from sonographer. All these were billed for physician interpretation, which is fraud. After that, I started to realize that a large number of our procedures were not indicated. Patient data, such as tests, symptoms, labs, etc., were fabricated and modified to trigger us to say yes to cases. I started noticing a lot of normal angiograms, which didn't make sense. Then they pushed us to always perform an intervention, usually atherectomy, because that's the highest reimbursement, around $20,000. There was inadequate equipment and only one nurse for every procedure who was also the office manager, billing department, receptionist. The ultrasound unit was damaged and images subdiagnostic at best. The EMR was from the early 2000s. Ultrasound and angiogram images were often deleted, tampered with, or swapped between patients, so if there was ever an audit, the fraud wouldn't stand out. Oh, and the angiographic equipment, X-ray, table, etc. hadn't been inspected or certified for years. I voiced my concerns. Nothing was done. The company existed solely to generate profit, with no regard for patients. I witnessed complications from procedures that didn't even happen in the first place. After enough of this, I went to work and suddenly quit at about 2 p.m. The company was also already under a corporate integrity agreement. The appropriate regulatory agencies were notified. There's still business as of today, but it won't be for long. Story 41, one boss quit, and they wanted me to run the department as the manager, but keep me at assistant pay too. They hired a new manager behind my back for the job that had been promising me for months and wanted me to train her. Still at assistant pay level 3, new manager went on vacation, and I was supposed to run the department alone again. I waited till the new manager was out of town and quit. Story 42, I tried putting my 2 weeks in, but every leadership individual was either gone on a business trip, vacation, or not my direct report. I gave my 2 weeks to a non-direct report manager, my manager's sister. I also sent him an email. That was exactly 2 weeks. My direct report manager comes in 2 days later and sees my email. He got because I was unethical and I didn't give a proper 2-week notice when I told him my last day was 12 days away. Because 2 days ago I tried reaching him and told his sister he got in basically whatevered me. The end of that week, I still had a week left. We got our paychecks. Since 2 weeks before that was a federal holiday, the shop was shut down and nobody could work because, holiday. Guess who didn't get paid for their holiday? Who has 2 thumbs and also had 50 of their paycheck that pay cycle? This guy. I went to his office and said there must be a mistake and said there wasn't. I asked him to elaborate, and his words were, wasn't fair you didn't give us the proper heads up, so I thought it would only be fair to do the same to you. I nodded and smiled and said, "Aight, bud." Went back to my office, up their ramshackled, in-house made database because them deleted entries and called OSHA on multiple violations and walked out the back door. But only after I dumped my container egg salad inside his lunchbox and put his lunchbox in the unair-conditioned shop during 98 temperatures in shop. You burns, you. I hope you're reading this you edited for clarity because I was pissed off writing this. I once rage quit as a server and walked home, and then walked back, and 20 minutes later, I lived close, and no one realized I had quit, so I put in my 2 weeks and finished it out. My partner, on the other hand, rage quit as a manager and closed a restaurant and sent everyone home. Owner didn't even know the joint was closed until 2 days later Most employees there never showed up anyways, so if any of them did show up and realized it was closed, they just went home.